people that are using your product are maybe not the folks that have budgets and the ability to endorse a bigger decision, right? And so I think that's the other myth busting we had to do was like, okay, like 20 people signed up at Microsoft, like go tell them and they'll tell their friends and everybody else will start using it. And when you reach out to that user, again, they're like, I signed up on my credit card, I'm using it for this reason, my boss probably doesn't know, so please don't tell them. And so you're kind of almost a little bit in conflict with, that growth strategy, trying to sell through them. And so a lot of times you need to use them as part of the story, is what I would say. And so what we would use is, it's not product qualified leads in our mind, it was product qualified accounts.
Welcome to today's episode of the Soundcheck. I'm delighted to have John Eitel here, who's not only an advisor to Trumpet, but also the Chief Sales Officer at Demandbase, company we all know in the world of sales, but was previously at Canva. And we're going to dig into that story today and cover all things PLG, PLS. But hopefully I've done a good job of introducing you. But John, great to have you on the podcast. Love to hear a little bit about your story.
Yeah, great to be here, Rory. Thanks for having me. And I think you hit all the high notes there. I've been doing this for, a little over 20 years, building, scaling sales teams, and evolving them with the times and the way the world's shifting. And so it is kind of fun. I've probably fashioned myself to be more of like a sales problem solver or kind of a sales puzzle master. And so I would say I probably kind of leaned in, quickly to the PLG movement when it was happening, just because it was a new puzzle to be solved. And it, had some really fun elements of things I'd done in the past. And so it was kind of great to bring kind of the old and new together and figure out like how this, new buying pattern of behavior is happening and how people can embrace it more efficiently.
Awesome. And that led you to your journey at Canva. If I think about Canva, I don't necessarily think of a sales team. And, that's also true for Hotjar, where I came from. So I think it's really interesting to hear how you ended up there and what that motion started to look like and what was the problem you were brought in to solve.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like if you look at my background historically, Rory, like before I got to Canva, it's been largely taking brands up market. So they had traction in maybe SMB, getting to mid-market to enterprise to Fortune 1000. So I had kind of done that sprint a few times at a number of different companies and really became, I'd say good at that and had some pattern recognition for doing that. I had been, reached out to, by the team at Canva and look, I took the call actually largely thinking like it wasn't a fit for me. I was like, I'm interested to meet with the founders because they're really prolific, cool founders and have a great story there. But my first concern was that they've been largely B2C. And if everything you look at my background, I've never done B2C. I am, B2B through and through. And so I took the conversation, really halfway thinking that this is going to be probably not a fit, but worth just hearing them out. And what I found really quickly was, Canva, who is the design team for, the design platform for everyday people. It makes design easy and accessible, for, small business owners, moms, people who want to create content more effectively. That was their game plan. But they saw this unique buying pattern when they reached out to me. They had actually started to see not just small businesses and everyday people using it. They started to see teams taking it to work. So it was this interesting phenomenon of, name any big company, you could find 30, 40 email addresses from that company that had signed up for Canva. So it was kind of crossing the chasm at that moment from B2C to B2B. And they were really now starting to think about like, what do we need to do? And they had been always to this point, PLG. So they'd never had a sales team. They'd never had customer facing motions. It was all really, self-serve and adopted that way. But they started to see this change in buying behavior. And they were like, okay, great. How do we embrace this? How do we build a sales team to go after this and build on that momentum? And so immediately it clicked for me that this actually was probably more aligned to my patterns than I thought, because it was still an upmarket motion. It was moving from now consumer into B2B. And, it was moving from SMB to mid-market to enterprise to Fortune 1000. So, we were seeing it, really broadly adopted across that, even education. We saw it into higher ed. And so there were some really, really fun, I'd say kind of nuances that we discovered quickly. And so we quickly aligned to build a team to go after that and build a product.
Awesome. I mean, congrats. It's a brilliant company. As you mentioned, amazing leadership. Melanie's incredible. But I think a lot of people also assume, PLG, you try before you buy, you can play around with the product, loads of inbound leads. It must be a dream scenario for a seller. But I think as we both know, it's not that straightforward. What would you say are like the most common challenges that you initially face switching from pure PLG to more of that product-led sales motion?
Yeah, so there were so many. I mean, I think the neat thing about my journey with Canva too is that they decided also to launch this enterprise offering and move to North America. So I had kind of a multifaceted remit in that the company had always been in Australia. So they were like, let's go build a sales and success team and a support team to go after enterprise. Let's also move into a new market. They were largely trying to serve the US and EMEA, from Australia, where time zones don't overlap. And so you really can't sell when you're trying to sell to people when they're sleeping, right? So there was this like big push to do all this stuff at once. And so, comically, I'd started my job at Canva right before the world shifted. So I, flew over, spent a couple weeks there in February of 2020. And so, as the world was about to shift, and in my last few days in Australia, I got on a plane to come back, and it was, as I took off, I was feeling the world was getting unsettled. The day I was in the air was the day that everything changed, and we got a text every hour on the hour with a new bad news update. But anyways, landed, kind of got settled, and had to start thinking about how do you build a team, how do you scale a team, and probably one of the more kind of chaotic times in the world. And look, I think some of the things that you have to kind of prepare for is preparing a company to embrace this new DNA of having a sales team. I think that's, I was the head of sales and I was the first sales hire. So like, I remember at one point I was like, I represent like less than 1% of the company right now, which is, not normal. If you're in B2B, you're typically, 20, 30% maybe of the overall makeup of the company. And so getting, the founders were bought in. They actually, saw this as an important strategy. The investors had really kind of, help them see this too, but getting the rest of the company to understand like how we had to shift, how we developed products, how we released products, to embrace these new teams. I think that was kind of step one. And it was a constant thing. I think you actually, for folks that are listening to this and going through this and they're that first hire or that first few hires, such an important part of this. Like I'm glad I'm leading with this. I think that was probably the one thing that most people miss is like, how do you become very present, and be, more vocal? And so we had regular town halls. And so I made sure to highlight hires. I made sure to highlight like success stories. And, every town hall, we had 2 to 3 kind of B2B wins that we would put on there. And we had a really great, way of showcasing them in a way that said, they're not only great wins for Canva because it's a lot of users and we care about users, they're going to pay us a lot of money and that's great too. But like, we tried to pick ones that had heart, right? So we picked like Walgreens at the time that was using our design platform to be able to get notices out about vaccines, right? We had Red Cross as a customer. And so it's like, okay, we wanted to show that like, not only was this tens of thousands of users that was signing up, but it added heart. And it was really kind of, hitting on all cylinders that the company cared about. And so it really helped, people who didn't understand B2B to understand it better because they're like, okay, like I can get why this is important to us here. So that's step one. I think the other thing too, like, a lot of times I would get the eye roll from smaller PLG companies getting started out about like, it must be really hard to be at Canva. You guys just broke 100 million monthly active users. Like, to your point, Rory, like the fish must be jumping in the boat. And look, there, definitely is some great things that happen, when you have that scenario. But some of the downside is like first impressions are real is always what I would tell people. And so, oftentimes we would go to a CIO at a big company or a CMO, and we would talk to them about why Canva could help them scale creative across their enterprise. And their first answer was like, oh, I love Canva. My wife used it for a birthday card for me last year, right? So they weren't thinking about us in that context as an enterprise grade tool, right? And so like we had brand awareness, which was good, but we had a brand perception problem, and we had to, really beat the drum of how do we help them understand, why Canva, and why now it made sense to help them, scale these things out. And so that was the big one. And then look, I think being able to be great with data, like the key to every PLG strategy is one, the product. And then the second part is your ability to understand your user data and understand the patterns that underlie it. And, like every company, even, Canva, who's grown to be this big, behemoth now, look, they didn't invest probably early in the data structure at the right times. And so we had our own kind of data challenges. Sometimes having, 100 million monthly active users is a painful thing too, because you're trying to find the ones that matter out of those. And they could be people all over the world, from nonprofits, from, consumers to businesses. And so, really is that like, how do you, find that needle in the haystack at the right time? Because we weren't building a big sales team. It was still a very kind of lean, mean, I'd say sales team on top of this. And so it was all about how do we efficiently serve the right customers to them at the right time, and make them more effective at their job. So there was, definitely some like first world problems or high class problems that we had to deal with. But I think that's, that was the fun part about this puzzle was figuring that out and making it all click.
Definitely. And I think, again, going back to that assumption that inbound, having a free plan is great, but, we sell enterprise, or, we just, that's never going to work for us. But actually some of the difficulties that we see, and, even with Trumpet, we have a free plan, very kind of PLG motion going on. That freemium model can actually lead to longer sales cycles. It can lead to you kind of creating a project for that business. They didn't realize it was a project because the actual decision makers are so far removed from the end users who have like sneakily brought on this product, haven't put it past procurement and got approval from IT. And then you're basically navigating a bottoms up and a top down motion at the same time as a rep, which is pretty unique. So yeah, all these things combined mean that it's just, I think it's so different, and people assume it's easy. But just because someone's using a product and they love it, it doesn't mean that it can suddenly roll out across 100, 1,000, 10,000 users. And are those challenges that you guys faced as well?
Totally. Yeah. So I've even shared some of my own anecdotes around this, but I would say, look, I think the founders of Canva, had such great success, with build a great product and it will have virality with a consumer audience. And so they assumed it would have that same virality in a B2B context. And as you're saying, that's not the case. And so they had this big belief that like Microsoft would had 20 users, added last night. And so it was this like kind of, I think misbelief of like, we'll go to bed tonight and we'll wake up and 20 will be 40. And, tomorrow when we wake up, it'll be 80. And the next day it'll be, 100. And so we had to do a little bit of myth busting on that internally too, to just say like, it's always going to be 20 because it's somebody who went rogue and they pulled out a credit card and like their boss probably doesn't know they're using it. And so I think that was kind of, one was being able to say like, this is why product-led sales needs to exist. And I'll tell you about like how we had to kind of shift our mindset a bit on that too, to attack those opportunities in the right way. But that was a big one there, and why you need, a product-led sales motion. We also saw there was a couple breakpoints or stall points. Like that was one thing that I really like to look at was like, where did customers kind of stall out and when did we need to insert a sales touch point? Because I think that when you are building a product-led sales motion, not everybody should get a sales touch. Not everybody wants a sales touch. It kind of like is not only inefficient and expensive, it's not what the customer wants to, right? And so it really becomes, this magical orchestration of like, who do you talk to when and how do you do that, at the right time? But another stall point we too saw was like, maybe we got past that 20 user, kind of piece. We got a department to start using it. So like now marketing's using it and it's spanned out across marketing. But we started to find stall points at like that, kind of $10,000, I think, dollar kind of limit where it was like, okay, now it needs to go to procurement. Like we were able to do it under kind of like the budgetary guidelines of, the person who owned that budget. And so they were able to kind of slip it under the radar to a certain point, but it's always going to stall there until we bring in someone who's able to go have that conversation with procurement, with the CIO, office, to be able to scale it to more users. So like, knowing when to insert them so that we don't just keep getting stalled at 20 users or, 10,000 US, like we had a kind of a clear strategy identified to be able to nurture them through that. Another thing too, Roy, that's interesting, and I'm sure you saw this, but I think like PLG in a consumer context, you can start to talk about like product, PQLs, product, qualified leads, right? And I think that that's a misnomer in B2B as well. And that the people that are using your product are maybe not the folks that have budget and the ability to endorse a bigger decision, right? And so I think that that's the other myth busting we had to do was like, okay, like 20 people signed up at Microsoft, like go tell them and they'll tell their friends and everybody else will start using it. And, when you reach out to that user, again, they're like, I signed up on my credit card. I'm using it for this reason. My boss probably doesn't know, so please don't tell them, and so you're kind of almost a little bit in conflict with, that growth strategy, trying to sell through them. And so a lot of times you need to use them as part of the story, is what I would say. And so what we would use is, it's not product qualified leads in our mind. It was product qualified accounts where it's like, if we saw, Microsoft balloon up to that 10,000, then it's like, okay, now we need to engage at a higher level and have a conversation with that CIO and talk to them about like, the great things that are happening in the marketing department and highlight that use case and how much efficiency they're getting, how much power they're getting out of it, and then how we want to scale it to others and get a enterprise wide, kind of licensing agreement. And so that's where that bridging moment really happens, I think, between PLG and PLS. Is when you understand, it's not PQLs probably in most people's context, it's accounts. And those are the heat map of, who you should sell to when, and then, when to apply those sales touches there.
Absolutely. And it's not a traditional sales approach either. I think you're not trying to necessarily get them on a call. It's all about, as you mentioned, education is quite a big piece. Like, what can they learn from you as a rep that they can't self-discover? Maybe it's customer stories, other use cases, what the roadmap looks like. Maybe trying out some of the more premium features that they haven't got because that plans for enterprise, which they should be on. And then there's kind of an education piece of, you're going to hit a limit at some point. You need to de-risk this for yourself because you've kind of gone out of your way to take on this product, but other people are going to, there's going to be groundswell. So I think that approach, it's less of a traditional cycle. It's more about education and what plays into that. And you mentioned earlier that I think would be great to touch on is data. If you're in B2B and if you're in SaaS or tech, there's a level of data as a rep that you can use when you're doing a product-led sales motion. Is that something that you've had to teach reps about, or has it come naturally because of those products that they've been selling?
No, I mean, it was a learning journey to take them through, and I think there is the easy things, like the smart reps will figure out the low hanging fruit is what I found. When we built this team in the beginning, we hired some reps with more entrepreneurial mindset who were the kind of figure it out early pioneers. And so they knew how to be able to source pulling from our, data, we can see when 20 users at Microsoft sign up. And so that was an easy one, and in the beginning, the low hanging fruit was about finding those at the right time too. Like when it happens, you want to be there and you want to be able to support them, with learning and onboarding and get them going. Cause we knew that, not only forming a team was a big moment of kind of wow there, but I think when they start to create designs, when they start to share designs, that was a powerful moment. And so, it really is, still the old sales mantra of the right time with the right message to the right person. You had to hit that. And so I think the early pioneers figured that out quickly. But once you start to exhaust that, data became more nuanced during the pandemic. And it was interesting too, being able to one, spot B2B usage when they're not using a company email, that's where things get more challenged. But I think you or I might sign up with our Gmail account, right, for something we're going to use, for our business use. And so how do I know, Rory or John, is at some big company, and so you have to be able to do some correlating and enrichment there to be able to find that. Inversely too, we found a lot of false positives, and that's where I was saying the data challenges became more unique. We found a lot of folks signing up with corporate domains during the pandemic. And I talked a lot to the team at Zoom who had the same kind of explosive growth story during the pandemic. But they're when we all kind of got thrust into work from home, it blurred the lines a lot in our lives. And so we used to probably keep just like we kept the home and the office separate, we kept our email separate. People started to confuse that. And so we would see a lot of folks Rory, who signed up, with his Zoom, email, but he was using it for a birthday party, for an invite for a friend. Right. So it's he had no even understanding of how we could help him at Zoom there, or an interest to use it at Zoom. And so we had to be able to use data analysis to be able to surface those needles in the haystack when they were either obvious, and we needed to get them to the right sellers fast, or when they were not obvious, how do we find them quickly? And then also be able to spot the false positives, right? If Rory signed up with a corporate domain, but didn't create a team, isn't sharing designs, he's probably doing stuff for himself, right? And so we started to pick up on some of the attributes and behaviors of what a corporate buying opportunity looked like.
Awesome. And with that in mind, you've seen probably the emergence of tools like Pocus, which do a great job of taking that data and making it actionable and giving those signals. And people listening might think, well, that's just if you're in the world of PLG. But actually, if you're a rep selling tech and you're running a pilot, maybe a proof of concept, a trial, I do believe, and keen to hear your thoughts, the modern day sales rep should be embracing data and using it, in outreach and discovery during pilots, at every touch point, because data's king.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Pocus. I'm a big fan of Endgame as well. Alex at Endgame and Alexa at Pocus have both kind of come up with unique strategies around this. But I think you're right. Look, the modern sales professional, like, is a different breed. They are more tech savvy. They are more data centric. And they are able to do a lot of this on their own, so that they can scrap out the early phases, but then also they're even more powerful when you start surfacing, some of the really higher level things that they can really take that and go even further with it there. And so, I've seen some of that pattern of behavior, and even, the old nuances that, maybe you or I used to know about, like, you got to make 100 dials, or you need to send this many emails, right? Like the modern sales, kind of pro today, sends fewer emails, makes fewer calls, but lands, bigger deals, right? Because they know how to use data to land that right punch at the right time.
Times are changing, eh?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with data, and if we're talking about data and sales, it obviously leads us on to enrichment, I think a hot topic at the moment. So I'd love to hear that transition from Canva, like true PLG, going to PLS, and then ending up at Demandbase as Chief Sales Officer. What's the kind of biggest difference you've seen, and how have you taken those learnings from Canva and that go-to-market motion to Demandbase?
Yeah, look, I think it's all, it's interesting. Here's a, another kind of myth from my PLG times that I thought was interesting, but I think there was always this, like, debate of, like, it was one or the other, right? It was sales or it was PLG. And I'm like, nah, it's kind of both, and I think the best B2B companies with the right, kind of market motion, are able to embrace those two powers together. It takes me to where I'm at Demandbase. I think Demandbase, is kind of like the, if you had a pyramid that I was sketching out on a whiteboard for you, I'd say, like, PLG should be the foundation. PLS should be kind of the second tier. And then account-based sales, to me, is kind of like the very tip of the pyramid there, right? But I think it is really being able to land those contacts at these really big companies, being able to have those conversations with, high up executives at Microsoft. Build some momentum on the PLG front. You've been able to sell maybe departmentally, and then it's like, okay, now we want to go site wide. And so, Demandbase is really great at giving that hyper focused approach. Like, you can make sure that, if you have 1,000, kind of buyers in your audience, you can use our ABX solution to be able to make sure that they're being touched, wherever they go on the internet. The advertising that we put out there together, touches them with relevant messages that drive them back to your product, right? We own massive amounts of data, and we work on enrichment, so we were able to arm SDRs with the ability to go out and have those conversations and really tie off with that. And then we bring all these pieces together so you can see, one, not only, when anonymous users are coming to your website, you can kind of see that, but you can also see when they're going all over the internet, are they searching for your competition? Are they researching you? As we know, like, the world of buying is completely shifted. It's not that, I show up because I have interest and I want you to educate me from, like, the very, start to the end, right? It's like, it looks more like a spaghetti bowl than a linear buyer's journey these days, where, buyers are doing a lot of this, like, self educating. They're talking to friends, they're talking to past, kind of users. And so, with Demandbase, not only can you, touch them wherever they are with the messages that matter, but you can also see what they're doing in some of this anonymous buying journey to be able to reach out to them at the right times and be able to deliver, content that matters, or deliver pricing at a time when they're looking at pricing, or be able to, give them some competitive intel when they're looking at you versus your competition and want to understand. And so it really is, truly that hyper-focused, kind of top of the pyramid where you're really, able to deliver the message to the right person at the right time.
Incredible. What a journey that you've had. I feel like you've touched every go-to-market motion that's known to man. But that's also led you to partnering with OpenView. And if anyone hasn't heard of OpenView, I think they coined the term PLG. Pretty sure. Kyle Poyer likes to put his name to it, and Blake as well. But you're advising startups there who are maybe doing PLG, maybe they're not. Maybe they're thinking about product-led sales, maybe account-based sales, and having, like, had exposure to all of those. What are some of the, like, top tips that you have for those early stage startups who are building that go-to-market motion and thinking about how to approach modern day sales?
Yeah, no, great call out. And it's probably one of, like, my favorite things that I do outside of my day to day, is advising their portfolio companies and prospects on PLG, kind of upmarket motions, right? So I get to talk to some of the, the brightest and best kind of future up and coming, I'd say PLG stories right at these inflection points. And so it is fun to be able to come in and advise them on, okay, we've got this groundswell of PLG, but we're realizing that we're starting to see some of these stall points or break points. So what do we do now? Who do we hire first, right? Is it a, sales leader? Is it a salesperson? Look, is it a coach or somebody who does kind of training and enablement around there? Like, I think there's this new thought of, you don't need SDRs. You need, people that can educate, and get usage up and then bring the seller in at the right time. Right. So, needing to think about that. And so, it's probably like my favorite part about it is, one, just digging into their business, their use case, and where they're stuck, and giving them advice on, kind of where I'd go next, and kind of my own just, thoughts on that. And a lot of times it is like just mapping out the buyer journey today, where it is, and where are some of the, stall points and where they're stuck, and then how do you augment with people, maybe at times, or product improvements to move through those, stall points or where they're stuck, when to layer in a sales team, and look how to structure and, compensate the sales team too. Like, that's the other thing, is that, usage is more fluid, and in a lot of cases, contracts are, less of a thing here. And so, you need to have a sales team that really thinks about like growth and adoption and usage, and longevity. And so I think that you don't want to go hire the Oracle sales team and bring them in when you've got this, PLG groundswell. No offense to Oracle, but not the right context, not the right tool for that job. And so, being able to identify, who are the right talents, like we talked about, Rory, like what is that modern, probably kind of SaaS pro that you want to bring into, who understands like how to make sense of the data, can help you kind of figure out how to, spot the patterns while they're happening here, and evolve with them. And so, those are kind of some of my favorite commentary that I get to layer in there. But the neat thing is it's different with each of them. Like, they're all coming to me from different kind of, walks of life, phases of the journey, problems they're solving. And that's, for me, is a lot of fun. I get to kind of step out of my day-to-day problems for a second and like help someone with theirs. And it uniquely often helps me figure out my own problems. Like, I find myself jotting a quick note where I'm like, the thing I was stuck on, I just figured out because I took my mind off of it for a second. And so big fan of OpenView, love what I do there, and the opportunity they give me. But I think it also, I would say big fan of also like giving back, mentoring, and advising others. There's something unique to it that just really helps you just as much as it helps them.
We can vouch for that. It's awesome to have you on board our journey. And it also sounds like what you're kind of summarizing that as is thinking about the buyer. Like, put yourself in the buyer's shoes, like the modern day buyer. How do they want to navigate that journey, and thinking slightly differently to traditional sales? On that, we're going to wrap up now, but I'd love to hear about a company that you think or would recommend, have seen, have worked with, that just nails that maybe PLG, that product-led sales, maybe either or combined motion, that you think people should go and check out and learn from.
Man, you're going to put me on the spot. So I'm forgetting the name of it here. Percent. It is actually a give back platform, and was one that I got exposure to through the OpenView crew here. But it allows you to manage your give back, your corporate give back more effectively. They've done some really cool partnerships, even with like Netflix, where you can watch a documentary on something that's going on in the world, and then you can give at the end of it there, and get corporate matching through your own company. And so it is really neat, because it is, user driven, kind of bottom up, because I think, where you give, and if you want to give, is a personal decision, but it often is reinforced by corporations, right? So being able to have corporate backing is such a big thing. So anyways, I was a big fan of Henry and his company there, and it was just neat to see like what they were doing, how they were making it more effective. And at Canva, we were also utilizing them. We have a major mission to give back and make the world better. And so, it was really fun to talk to him about that and help him navigate us and understand how to work with us more effectively too. But yeah, that was one of my favorite stories of late.
Love that. I'm going to have to check them out. Thanks for sharing. And the last two questions, which we ask everyone, is who else do you think we should get on the show, and another podcast that you would recommend?
Yeah. So I think like a couple folks that I really, really like right now from my Canva days. Jorge Bastard, who is in London and was my head of EMEA when we worked together, and is doing great things. He is also building community, across LATAM. And so I think he's got some really great mindset around PLG. He worked at Facebook in their workplace group there too. So he understands like how do you take a consumer to commercial, journey. understands Europe, but just also a really smart leader and someone I really like. So I would say him is probably my favorite right now as a recommendation there. I'm a huge fan of how I built this. It's an oldie but a goodie, but I always go back to it, and I just feel like I'm often surprised that people don't know about how I built this, because it's been around for forever and probably one of the first podcasts I got into. But I just think for entrepreneurs going through struggles, especially times like today, great to hear how some of the greatest in the world, went through their own kind of battles to get to where they are. And I love Guy Raz's, kind of mindset around how much, what percentage did luck play in the strategy? Like that question he asked at the end, I'm always just curious to see how people respond to that. So anyways, that's my favorite. It's an oldie but a goodie.
Definitely. I think Guy Raz should narrate some storybooks, and audiobooks be great to listen to. John, a pleasure. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation, and looking forward to the next one.
Likewise, Roy. Thanks so much.
Cheers.